Cherrie Moraga was born on September 25, 1952, in Los Angeles County, and is now a renowned writer, playwright, feminist, and activist. She began her work as a professional writer as a co-editor with Gloria Anzaldúa of the feminist anthology This Bridge Called My Back, Writings by Radical Women of Color. Moraga and Anzaldúa put focus on creating a collective narrative because, Moraga claims, having a collective voice is at the core of being a mestiza. Moraga served as an artist-in-residence in the Department of Theater and Performance Studies at Stanford University for over 20 years. While at Stanford, she mentored a generation of now published writers and professional playwrights who cite Moraga as one of their most influential educators. Though Moraga found her time at Stanford valuable, she characterized her career there as a colonial experience. She recognized that she was working in a Eurocentric theater and art department, and that her colleagues treated her as a second-class scholar due to her work and positionality as a queer Chicana feminist. Moraga felt that she was delegitimized as a scholar by her peers because she was engaging in activist public conversations. When she was offered a position with the Department of English at the University of California, Santa Barbara in 2017, she took it. At first, she was skeptical of leaving students that she had developed real connections with, and asked UC Santa Barbara what they had in mind for her at the university. When they replied by asking her what she wanted to do, she knew she had to go. An institution had never before asked Moraga what she wanted to do. It was with that freedom at UC Santa Barbara that she instituted Las Maestras Center for Red Xicana Indigenous Thought and Art Practice with Celia Herrera Rodriguez.
Moraga's role as a founding member in 2002 of La Red Xicana Indigena, an advocacy network of Chicanas working in education, the arts, spiritual practice, and indigenous women's rights, is the epitome of how Chicana feminist theory can be put into practice. Through examining her work with La Red Xicana Indigena, a better understanding of the positive repercussions of putting theory into action is facilitated, and the far-reaching impacts of actively engaging in and promoting the development of Conocimiento is validated. The entire process of Conocimiento is ongoing, and it is most valuable when the knowledge produced by it is put to use. Even well-known writers like Moraga experience an entire process of coming to consciousness. Here, she clearly expresses the beginning of her experience of developing her own Conocimiento when she states,
and even as a little girl, I recognized sort of this difference between sort of how I was treated and my Mexican classmates, that there were sort of assumptions about me being smarter, and this encouragement that if you wanted to be college prep and you hung out with the white girls and, like that. It was always a place of real disquiet for me because my love was so profound about being Mexicana, and I felt like I was constantly being in a position to betray being Mexican. People say, oh, you're not really Mexican, are you? I go, yeah. And it's like, you're Spanish. No, I'm Mexican. And even as a little girl, I used to kind of fight people around that because I always felt like I was selling out my family. But those choices also have big payoff. Privilege equals more access to, money, access to success. People make those choices all the time. In my case, it was finally sort of landing on a side of identity where I had no choice, which was my lesbianism, that really just split open my consciousness about my identity, also racially, regardless of my skin color.
Through validating her own journey to Conocimiento, Moraga recognizes the affirmation the mindset of Conocimiento provides to members of marginalized communities, thus influencing her to become involved in La Red Xicana Indigena.
Moraga joined the feminist movement, hoping to find in it the acceptance and support that as a lesbian Chicana, her patriarchal community deprived her of. However, she quickly realized that the movement was highly racialized and that it overlooked important issues specific to women of color. In her anthology, This Bridge Called My Back, she gathered the stories of radical women of color and their own perspectives on feminism.
Then, white women are describing a kind of freedom that had nothing to do with our lives. The main things I remember my criticism was that there was a movement called lesbian separatism at that time. So what they said is that basically in order for you to really be an authentic lesbian, you had to not have any relationships with men at all. It would smash the patriarchy, but like at an impossible level, because what it really meant, when it really came down to it, it meant that Also, then you had to give up your father, you had to give up your brother, you had to give up your son for some of these women. And so as a woman of color, if you had any loyalties to your culture, if you insisted on having loyalties to your culture, which means that, no, actually, I really want, Chicano men to be free. So that caused an incredible rift in the movement. And basically, I'm grateful for it because you're talking about being pissed off, it pissed off many of us enough that we decided that, in fact, no, what feminism is? There's Chicana feminism, there's black feminism, there's white feminism, there's women of color feminism. And that was so much the motivation for Bridge, which is to basically that we had the right to define how our people wanted to be free.
Chicana feminism reclaims Chicanas' existence between the Chicano movement and the American feminist movements. Moraga's role now in La Red Xicana Indigena is to inspire and guide young Chicanas toward reaching their indigenous consciousness and to act as a collective to bring change by being actively involved in political, educational, and social work. La Red Xicana Indigena encourages young Chicanas to engage in actions that raise indigenous conciencia, which spans from the communities to that of a growing continental and global indigenous peoples movement. For example, their direct participation in the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, in which Mexicana representatives of migrant rights organizations and indigenous tribes present their human rights concerns to the forum and advocate for change. Young radical women of color like them are needed now more than ever in leading movements that recognize the importance of intersectionality in order to free themselves from social, judicial, sexual, and cultural oppressions. There is a need for grassroots strategic organizing, which allows for concrete actions that will raise consciousness powerful enough to reach policy change.
La Red Xicana Indigena website states that the organization politically recognizes that we stand with little legal entitlement to our claim as indigenous peoples within America. However, we come together on the belief that, with neither land-based nor enrollment card, like so many urban Indians in the north and so many displaced and undocumented migrants coming from the south, we have the right to right ourselves. That is, to attempt to put La Xicana Indigena back into balance with her origins and work vigorously from that site toward the decolonization, economic independence, and cultural integrity of our communities. To that end, our members support projects which encourage self-sustaining economies, such as community gardens, that produce traditional medicines and provide for the nutritional needs of local communities. The organization is able to successfully validate and empower Chicanas through raising indigenous consciousness from the micro level of La Familia to the community as a whole, and lastly to the level of a continental and global indigenous peoples movement. This framework of organizing around indigenous roots is at the core of a mestiza consciousness and a result of Conocimiento. It is about deconstructing hegemonic beliefs and rewriting Chicanx people into the narrative. Although Cherrie Moraga is a well-established and successful Chicana feminist, the process of Conocimiento is not just restricted to her level of academia. Chicanas everywhere are coming to consciousness all the time, and younger generations are adopting theory that has been laid before them and putting it into practice.
I am Vianney Ortiz and I am 17 years old. I go to America's High School. It's important for me to be here today because too many kids are dying out here in schools and we're not supposed to go. We go to school to learn and we shouldn't be scared of going.
This is my country. This is my country. I came here and I helped rebuild it.
I am a Chicana, and I have had to face a lot of systematic issues.
Even though I have 3 educational degrees, I am still fighting to ensure that young people like myself are not deported.
I think it's time for us to be united, to present a strong front, to actually fight for what we want.